Rob Mangold here, Mike's brother. I said I'd get back to you, and I am. Now is the time we're going to go into more detail about what happened on December 6, 2015 with Mike Mangold, the pilot, and his passenger, Guage. We're going to look at we're going to pick up where we left off. Last time I spoke to you, video number 2, we talked about the what, the where, the when, and the how. We know that. More is pending, and let's get into it. Right now, we see 4 possibilities. Investigation teams have been looking at this for a while now. World-renowned experts on this team. I'd love to disclose who they are. You will soon find out, I'm sure. Now, people talked about, is it an accident? Is it performance tuning? Is it suicide or nefarious intent? You might have another possibility. Please let us know. I'm going at this with an open mind. I want to tell you the story as if you were jurors in a jury box, and at the end, you deliberate, you decide. See if you concur. Now, the first thing we look at is no one believes this is an accident, and here's the supporting evidence right now why it is not an accident. Number 1, the Fuel Control Unit is at 85 ATM. ATM, by the way, is the European metric for measuring atmosphere. Just so you know, I said it in other videos, 1 ATM is roughly 14.69 psi. So that's a multiplier. Now, the FCU is at 85 ATM. This is not a valid setting per the AI25TL maintenance manual, which is free. We downloaded. You can get it as well. And per the disintegration report, which we have. Second, the results of this extreme setting are extreme engine failure. Strategically, this happens at the most critical time at takeoff. We're going to talk about that more. Remember that thought. It happens only at takeoff. Third, this setting is deliberately, intentionally, and purposely done. Does that sound like an accident when you do that way? And this is at the maximum. It doesn't go any higher. This is per the NTSB report. Typically, this FCU is never set over 55. What's it doing at 85? Fourth, the adjuster, if you want to call the person or the group that, disregard procedure for the AI25TL maintenance manual and what a certified aircraft and power plant mechanic would do. The pilot in command was not notified. There is no safety wire. There is no paint seal. There is no lead seal. There is no documentation. There is no entry in the logbook. There is no telling someone else. And there is no solo test flight. No quality check. And fifth, this is the single most important fact. Everyone knows the FCU pressure should never be at 85 ATM. By the 65 ATM red line on the cockpit FCU pressure gauge. Have a look. You've seen this photo before. You see the red line on the gauge. It's in front of the pilot all the time, and anyone who works in this aircraft. And you would have read the manual, you would have known. You have no business being over 65 ATM. Some people have suggested performance tuning. Let me tell you why it's not performance tuning. Number 1, the FCU 55 ATM setting is typical. The cockpit FCU pressure gauge we just showed you has the red line at 65 ATM. This was set not at 55, 85 ATM. That's 54% higher than what it should be at. 441 PSI more. I gave the example of inflating your tire to 441 PSI. Here's one you can relate to. Everybody lives somewhere, me, in this house right now. Water pressure, typically between 55 and 75. PSI, yes. What would happen if we up the water pressure to 441 PSI higher? I'd love to hear your comments on that. Second, the fuel control unit is not tuned to the middle of a range. It's set to the highest possible pressure of 85 ATM. There's no signs of incremental steps. If you've ever performance tuned anything, any engine, you would move in small incremental steps. The setting would be in the middle of a range. Any engineer would tell you that as well. Why is it all the way to the maximum setting you can't go anymore? Is that performance tuning? Now, third, no pilot or mechanic would make this change, knowing it would lead to catastrophic engine failure. The AI-25TL maintenance manual says so. Not over 55. You're over 55, you've got a problem. You need to investigate it as a pilot or a mechanic. Fourth, this disintegration report warns of engine failure. It disintegrates above 75 ATM. Now remember, that's for a stock AI-25TL engine. Fifth, why performance tune for this flight? The L-39 was not in a race or competition, but a joyride with the passenger, Guage. If we had this 85 ATM setting, the fuel consumption is enormous. Why would you do that? But yet it was set at 85. And sixth, the single most important fact once again, everyone knows FCU pressure should never be at 85 ATM. Why? By the ATM red line on the cockpit FCU fuel pressure gauge. This is just some of the evidence why it is not performance tuning. The cockpit once again. Why it is not suicide? First, look, so you know right now, all this stuff from when Mike pulls on the runway, throttles up to takeoff, and the jet rolls over, crashes, is 25 seconds or less. He has roughly 20 seconds or less to do anything. First, during takeoff at onboard fire, he's in the air, the pilot immediately shuts down the fuel flow. He has to lift up a cover, turn off the toggle, shut off the fuel flow per the emergency procedures in the flight manual. This has been verified by the NTSB report. Second, the pilot tries to abort the takeoff. He immediately tries to land because the landing gear is still down and the flaps are set. He's down the runway, the gear's down. Then he attempts to save two lives and the jet. The pilot flies to the right of one-way run 18 to set up a smooth arc to turn left and create more room to land on the adjacent runway 08, since there's no room at the end of 18. You're going to see a photo in a moment. The end of 18, he's already there. It's a prairie wash, rugged terrain, stones, sand, desert shrubbery, uneven ground. He can't set it down. There's no runway surface left on 18. He has no choice. And remember, this is less than 25 seconds. He's got to go left and land on runway 26, but he's in the middle of 26. If he makes it, the runway is longer, but yet very short. So that's some of the things the pilot had to contend with. Fourth, why would he take passenger Guage up to his death? He just spent an hour with him, telling him about safety, putting the parachute on him, and talking to people in the fuel area as he's fueling the plane. They describe Mike as in a good mood, and Guage as well. And fifth, there's no suicide note or warning signs. You've all heard stories about suicide. Usually, after the fact, somebody finds a note. There's some indication along the way. We don't have any of that. And me, Rob, as Mike's brother, Mike and I are very close. No indication, nothing. He surely would have left something for me. Meaning a note or an indication. I know this from working with him on all the Red Bull Air Race World Championships and everything else we worked on. The crash site photo. This is from the NTSB. I simply marked runway 18 he took off from and 08, the adjacent cross runway he attempted to land on. I drew the yellow arc so you can see what this pilot intended to do. And clearly, this is not the actions of a suicidal person. There you have it. The evidence shows this is clearly not a suicide. Why it is nefarious intent. As I said before, think of this. You're like a juror. You decide. The investigation team has these 10 important facts. 1. The Fuel Control Unit was not performance tuned to the middle of a range. There's no signs of incremental or small step increases. No indication of performance tests or loss of performance prior to this. Second, the FCU was intentionally, deliberately, purposely set to maximum 85 ATM per the NTSB report. This causes extreme catastrophic engine failure. Third, strategically, this is time for a suspected takeoff with partial run-up after the annual. There's an entry in a flight manual that says, after the last flight, a pilot can go within roughly 72 hours or 3 days. He doesn't have to do a full run-up. He can do a partial run-up before he takes off, meaning he only needs to test up to 85% power. However, when you take off, you need 100% power, full throttle, usually 106% throttle. That's the way these aircraft work. So you would never go to 100 or 106% throttle until you're on the runway to take off, because he's within this roughly 3-day window after the annual, with confidence that 2 race pilots and a mechanic worked on and flew the plane up in Reno. We know the plane was okay when he left Reno because he made the flight all the way down to Victorville, okay, Apple Valley Airport. Now, fourth, screw number 28 is not at a valid setting per the NTSB report and AI-25TL manual. It is ridiculously high, and it goes against those 2 documents. Fifth, the FCU at 85 ATM could have only been set after the last flight from Reno, when the L-39 is at Apple Valley Airport, the 3 days prior to the fatal takeoff. Because if he did it up in Reno, the crash and burn and the deaths would have been at Reno, and they were at Apple Valley only. 6. The adjuster disregarded procedure per the AI-25TL maintenance manual. Pilot command not notified, no safety wire, no paint seal, no lead seal, no documentation, no entry in the logbook, no telling someone else, no solo test flight in Reno. They did, because it came out of the annual. So you realize you should be doing a solo test flight and a quality check. They did in Reno. 7th, the L-39 tail cone has excessive heat signature, scorch, and burn marks on the last flight. Look in the previous video at the tail cone. You're going to see the burnt metal inside the tail cone. The outside, the flames from the fire, hardly even damaged the paint and the outside of the tail cone. So we know the fuel control unit settings burned severely the inside, extremely severely the inside of the tail cone, because of the setting on the FCU, the extended exhaust flame out the back of the tail cone. 8th, no one admits to the adjustment. Now, some of you ask me, why do you include that, Rob? Well, think about it. If you or a friend did it and you didn't read the manuals and ignored the maximums, and you went and did it, and you destroyed a $500,000 aircraft and you killed 2 people, is that something you would admit to? That mistake, that error? Is that something you'd be proud of? Need I say more on that? 9, this is premeditated by actions and evidence. Now, I can't go into everything right now because we're working with other organizations in another category, let's say, that might look at motive, means, and opportunity. More on that later. And 10th, that single most important fact that keeps coming up every single time. Everyone knows the FCU pressure should never be at 85 ATM by the 65 ATM red line on the cockpit FCU pressure gauge. Everybody knows never to set it there. And so you deliberate on that. I'd love to hear in your comments where you stand on this. I'll tell you, the investigation team moves forward to the next phase with a laser-like focus on nefarious intent. Till next time, we'll see you another way, another day. Thanks.